Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Hope everybody's having a great Monday night. Listen, we did the full Aaron Torres pod on Sunday night, reacting to the full weekend that was in college hoops, a little NFL draft stuff at the end of the show. But we do a lot of recruiting on the YouTube channel, the Aaron Torres pod YouTube channel. And I got a question via DM. You can always reach out, Aaron Torres pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres pod on Instagram. Also, Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. So you can reach out there, but I got an interesting DM and an interesting question. It was an appropriate DM, by the way, but a question about the recruitment of a certain player, a guy that you see on the screen right now, a player by the name of Alijah Arenas. Certainly one of the more interesting recruitments going on right now. And let's just lay out why it's so interesting. One, he is one of the best guards in high school basketball, about 6'5". We'll get to his game and how he plays in just a minute. Two, if the name sounds familiar, I think if you're watching this video, you probably know. Yes, he is the son of NBA legend Gilbert Arenas, one of my favorite players that I used to watch growing up. I say growing up, he's like, just a few years older than me. But the point being, he's the son of Gilbert Arenas, NBA legend. And what is especially interesting about his recruitment is that both he and his dad have said publicly he is a member of the class of 2026 right now. But the plan is to reclassify and play college basketball next year. In other words, if you Google him, he's in the class of 2026, but he is really a 2025 player. And so the recruitment now is starting to ramp up. And I think it is worth having a conversation again because people are starting to talk about this recruitment. And they are really starting to talk about this recruitment because he did an interview over the weekend. That's where kind of the DM came from, the question about it. Basically, Torres, can you talk about this? He did an interview with 24/7 Sports, Brandon Jenkins, good get by Brandon Jenkins, where he talked a little bit about his recruitment. And I'm just going to read directly from the article. And then I'm going to share kind of the stuff that I've heard behind the scenes and all that good stuff. And we'll break it all down. But this is directly from 24/7 Sports. It says, during his weekend at the Classic at Damien, an event I was supposed to go to, I believe, the night that he put up monster numbers. We'll talk about that in a second. Assistant coaches from Arizona, Kentucky, and USC were in the stands watching him put on a show. Those three programs are the schools that Arenas is said to be are becoming his main focus. Then the quote directly from Alijah Arenas. Those three schools are the ones that are doing the best job at making me feel like family. They are the three that I've been keying in on all along with a few others. So Alijah Arenas, class of 2025 soon, and three schools it appears as though he is prioritizing as a recruit: Arizona, Kentucky, and USC. So let's break it down. I think it's a little early to presume anything, but I think there are both strengths and weaknesses in all three of those schools' pitches. And while it is again early, I would be kind of surprised if it was anyone other than those three schools. So first of all, let's talk about the player. Really fun player to watch. Again, I grew up watching Gil, and what I would just say about Elijah's game, a little bit of a different player, but kind of the same player, right? Gil was a bucket getter, could get you 30, 40, 50 on any given night. And Elijah's kind of the same. Only difference, he's a little bit taller, a little bit longer. He's 6'5", 6'6". I think Gil was like 6'4", whatever. Doesn't really matter. But the point I'm trying to make, the way his dad played is the way that he plays. And he's obviously so refined because he grew up in that NBA culture and NBA environment. So 6'6", can get to the rim with either hand, can finish with either hand, can shoot, can pull up, mid-range game, all that good stuff. And I mentioned a minute ago, the interview took place at an event called the Classic at Damien, that is an LA-based Christmas tournament. And I was supposed to actually go the night that he put up like 54 points in one game. So the kid can get buckets. It's why he's reclassifying. I think he's ready to play college basketball next year. And now the question becomes, where is he going to end up? Who is going to get him? All that good stuff. And like I said, I think there's strengths and weaknesses in everybody's pitch. First off, let's start with Kentucky. Kentucky's kind of an interesting one, right? Because look, I think there are a lot of variables that are true and false with Kentucky. One, they offered him when he was still technically in the class of 2026. But at the same time, I don't believe that they would have sent an assistant to this event over the last couple weeks. It's been known publicly for weeks that he's going to be a member of the class of 2025. So I'm sure privately behind the scenes, Kentucky had probably some awareness that this would happen. And I would find it very strange that they would send a recruiter all the way out to California if in fact he was not, if in fact they weren't recruiting him for 2025. So I think Kentucky is in the mix, but I think the counter to that with Kentucky is they're really filled at the guard position, specifically in the class of 2025. So we all know, for people who are maybe SC fans, Arizona fans, college basketball fans that don't follow other schools recruiting, Kentucky has already a really solid 2025 class going. But what's worth noting here is that there are two guards that I think kind of the roles are already defined. Caden Lewis, 6'2", 6'3" guard from the DC area, really talented player. He's kind of a lead guard type. UConn was recruiting him. Duke was recruiting him. He chooses Kentucky, etc. But at the same time, he's kind of a lead guard. Jasper Johnson, a Kentucky native who's now playing at OTE, Overtime Elite, he is also committed as well. And so it's not a knock on either of those two players. It's not a knock on Alijah Arenas. I would just be curious where Alijah Arenas fits in with those other two if you are still recruiting him for the class of 2025. Think that's where it gets interesting. Think that, to me, makes it maybe a little bit sketchy as far as fit. And then also, like, Mark Pope has kind of publicly and privately been like, look, we're not looking to bring in 6, 7, 8-man recruiting classes in this era. I think, a lot of coaches, I mean, listen, Calipari said it. He's like, look, the days of bringing in 7 or 8 freshmen, you just can't do that in college basketball anymore. So you look at Kentucky, they have a bunch of guys that should be back next year, whether it's Brandon Garrison, Colin Chandler. I know those guys aren't guards, but you get the point. Otega Owe could be back as well. And so I just bring it up because you kind of sit there and say, okay, the spots are kind of filling up pretty quickly, especially with 2 other freshman guards already in the class, one of which plays at his best with the ball in his hands. And so you wonder, does it make sense for Kentucky? We'll see. Like I said, I don't think they'd be sending an assistant if they weren't interested. I just don't know that I fully understand the fit right now. But again, it's early. Alijah Arenas has said he's not committing till March or April. So it gives us some time to kind of evaluate and kind of figure out, okay, what makes sense, what doesn't. Let's keep the conversation going. USC, baby. Fight on to victory. Interesting ties here. First of all, Alijah Arenas, I think kind of goes without saying, he is based in LA. So it's a relatively local school. But I think what's also interesting, I don't know how many people know this, Gilbert Arenas actually played for Eric Musselman in the NBA. Gilbert Arenas' second year as an NBA player, he played for the Golden State Warriors. Eric Musselman was the head coach. Coach Muss, if you see this, I'm sorry. I love you. You're the best. But it kind of shows how long Coach Muss has been around, right? I mean, it speaks to his history in the game of basketball, but it also speaks to the relationships that he has built. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing in this recruitment, is that Eric Musselman actually coached Gilbert Arenas. Now his son is being recruited by the USC staff. So the local ties are there. The family ties are there. I guess what I would say that gets kind of interesting too, USC has won, even under the previous staff, they quietly recruited really well. Evan Mobley went to USC, whoever, obviously Isaiah Mobley, his brother was there. Kevin Porter went there. So there was a lot of NBA dudes that came through under the previous staff. But besides the Musselman ties to Alijah Arenas, I think what also becomes interesting is that Musselman was a monster recruiter during his time at Arkansas. I mean, you go through the time at Arkansas, Moses Moody has already won a ring in the NBA. That 2022 class, which was the number 2 recruiting class in America behind only Duke, with Jordan Walsh, with Anthony Black, with Nick Smith Jr., 3 McDonald's All-Americans. We all remember the famous picture of Eric Musselman with 3 burgers on his desk to signify that they got commitments from 3 burger boys, 3 McDonald's All-Americans. So it's all a long-winded way of me just saying, Musselman has proven that he can recruit this caliber of player. He can get guys to the next level as well. I think that's an important part of the sales pitch, which I haven't talked to anybody at USC, but I think it makes a lot of sense, right? One thing to give Coach Muss credit for, and we talked about it dating back to his days at Arkansas, is if you're good enough, he's going to put the ball in your hands and let you cook, for lack of a better term. Remember that year Anthony Black was at Arkansas? Anthony Black had the ball in his hands from day one, and Coach Muss never hesitated. And actually, Coach Muss raved about how mature he was and how he carried himself, all that good stuff. So it's not as though Coach Muss is afraid to actually put the ball in your hands, even as a true freshman. And you would think at SC, like they got some nice players this year. I was watching their game against Michigan. I like some of the players a lot on that roster, whether it's Kevin Patton Jr., a young guy I wasn't really familiar with. Wesley Yates is starting to play well. But I think it's not an exaggeration to say that Alijah could go in from day one early and have the ball in his hands if he was capable. Really quickly, I think it is worth acknowledging the Arizona Wildcats because obviously there are a ton of ties. You know, if Coach Muss has known Alijah Arenas dating back to his days as a young player in the NBA, obviously I think anybody watching this video knows that Alijah Arenas' dad, Gilbert Arenas, played at Arizona back in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, 2001 national championship game. Though I know Arizona fans, we won't get started on that one. I know there were some controversial calls down the stretch, okay? But the bottom line is, look, the Arenas family obviously has huge ties to the to Arizona, and I think it's kind of an interesting dynamic developing between the school and the family. And it's early, and I think it would be unfair of me to name anybody a leader, but you can see the natural ties, right? Gil played there. It's a West Coast school. Alijah was out there for the Arizona Duke game a few weeks ago. But I think what also is worth noting is a few things. One, in this NIL world, you'd have to imagine that there would be a lot of great opportunities for Alijah Arenas being the son of an Arizona legend. Listen, I know a little bit about the NIL world. I can't speak to how every school does it everywhere, but I would imagine those Arizona-based businesses, the Tucson-based businesses would be itching to not only work with Alijah Arenas, but maybe as a package deal with his dad, because Gilbert Arenas' name obviously carries a lot of weight in that community still. So you'd think that there would be some opportunities maybe at Arizona that there wouldn't be other places. And I think conversely for Arizona, I think this is sort of an important recruit, right? I see my buddy Michael Luke talk about this, but this is kind of one you got to get if you're Tommy Lloyd. Legacy player, Arizona ties, all of that. And I just think it becomes an interesting conversation of, you know, even at Arizona, again, with the NIL opportunities, is there opportunities there that wouldn't be elsewhere? And then I think above and beyond in this NIL world, and again, I know we're getting to a place of revenue sharing, schools paying directly, et cetera. But you do wonder, do you kind of go above and beyond that NIL asking price because he is an Arizona Wildcat legacy? I'll give you kind of a random example, but if a Kentucky fan is still watching this video, Jasper Johnson, who is committed in their class this year, we just talked about him a second ago. You know, his dad played at Kentucky, and it kind of became clear to Mark Pope in that recruitment, hey, if you need some extra resources that might not be available for another kid, we'll figure out a way to get it done, but don't lose this kid just because of NIL. This is Jasper Johnson I'm talking about, and I would imagine it's pretty much the same at Arizona as well. So we'll see what happens. It's early in the recruitment, but I would be remiss if I did not talk a little bit here on a Monday about Alijah Arenas, very intriguing player, and we will see what happens from here. If you could do me a quick favor, make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day, full episodes several times a week. A lot of college hoops going forward. Obviously, we still got to talk some college football playoff as well, but make sure you're subscribed. And as always, make sure you're following at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram.